Do you know that there are already more than a dozen versions of the causes of the mysterious death of the Dyatlov group, but no one else in the world could not reveal this secret? Hello, comrades. Welcome to the channel Red Russians, the channel about everything Russian. In this video, you will learn about the top 5 most mysterious and terrible stories of Russia and the USSR which really happened. About each of these mysterious stories I will tell you separately and in detail. Watch for new videos on the channel Red Russians. The fifth place, the Kyshtym Dwarf. In May 1996, near the Ural city of Kyshtym, pensioner Tamara Prosvirina found a strange living creature of small size. She took him to her home, called him Alyoshenka, and began to take care of him as a child. Shortly before son of Tamara Prosvirina was put in prison, which affected her mental state. Therefore, she saw a small child in the found creature. She fed him sweets, and this fact is confirmed by witnesses of people who saw that the creature was alive and made warrior sounds. Tamara Prosvirina swallowed him and walked with him on the street, called the creature her son. Her neighbors thought that she takes leave on senses, and she went with the doll, and they called an ambulance, which took Tamara Prosvirina to a psychiatric hospital. Without her care and feeding, the creature, which was called Alyoshenka, died. After some time, the already mummified remains of this creature was found by the investigator of the local police. He took the mummy to an informal examination to the doctors, among whom was a pathologist and forensic expert. They concluded that this is not a newborn child with deviations, which were often born in this area as a result of a radiation accident at the Mayak nuclear facility plant. When examining the body of the creature, the doctors found that he had no ear concha, parietal and temporal bones, sexual organs and anus are also not found. Then, under strange circumstances, the investigator transferred the mummy to a study group of people who identified themselves as ufologists. Since then, the remains of the creature have disappeared. Tamara Prosvirina died under strange circumstances by getting under the car. A lot of researchers and journalists are looking for a mummy to this day. This story has many secrets, inconsistencies, and to this day disputes continue what kind of creature it was. Versions are numerous, from the fact that it was really an alien or someone else. In any case, without the body it is impossible to conduct scientific research that would put an end to this story. The fourth place, the well to hell, Kola super deep borehole. In 1970, in the USSR on the Kola Peninsula, Soviet scientists began drilling an ultra-deep well. Unlike other super-deep wells that were drilled for oil production or geological exploration, the Kola well was drilled exclusively for research purposes. In 1983, they drilled 12,066 meters deep into the earth and temporarily stopped because they were preparing for the International Geological Congress, which was to be held in 1984 in Moscow. On September 27, 1948, drilling was continued. At the first descent of the drill occurred an accident. The drill string broke off. Drilling resumed from a depth of 7,000 meters, and by 1990 a new branch reached a depth of 12,262 meters. However, the drill string was cut off again, and the drilling was completed and never started again. The fact that the Soviet scientist was the first who in the history of mankind was able to drill into the depths of the earth for more than 12 kilometers serves as the source of the urban legend of the well to hell. According to the legend, during the drilling in the very depth of the earth, the bore suddenly fell into emptiness. To find out what's wrong, the scientist dropped the microphone there, capable of operating at extremely high temperatures and other sensors. The temperature inside reached more than 1000 degrees Celsius. In addition, in the microphone, scientist was able to hear human cries and moans. Everyone realized that they had been drilled to hell. Soon after the terrible discovery, the collapse of the USSR followed. In fact, this weird story is a fiction. First, never 20 years ago, nor today, does not exist any heat-resistant microphones capable of operating at 1000 degrees Celsius, and acoustic methods of well studying are recorded not by the sound itself and not by a microphone, but by geophones. Secondly, the depth at which the drilling stopped was 12,262 meters with a fixed temperature around 220 degrees Celsius, which does not correspond to thousands of degrees of infernal flame. David Mironovich Guberman, one of the authors of the project, under the guidance and with the direct participation of which the Kola well was drilled, in one of the interviews told this story was first published in a Finnish youth newspaper in the Fool's Day and then dispersed around the world. In addition of the project and stopping drilling of the Kola super-deep well was no mysticism. The fact is that after the collapse of the USSR, in which huge amounts of money were spent on science and education, in new realities, no one wanted to spend a lot of money on science, and especially no one was going to allocate money for such a project as well drilling. More details about Kola Super Deep well will be released on the channel, because until now it is the deepest borehole in the world. The data obtained from researchers of Kola Super Deep well literally turned the notion of all scientific data of what is under our feet. In the deep layers of age more than 2.8 billion years, scientists have found 14 types of petrified microorganisms. This made it possible to make a discovery that life on our planet arose 1.5 billion years ago later when we thought. The third place. Tunguska, event known in Russia as the Tunguska Meteorite. In June 30, 1908, about 7 o'clock in the morning, a large fireball flew over the territory of the Yenisei River basin in Siberia. This flight was observed in many settlements in that area, and people there heard thundering sounds. The shape of this astronomical body is described as a round, spherical, or cylindrical, with red, yellow, or white color. There was no smoke trail behind this cosmic body, but the description of some eyewitnesses include the bright rainbow bands stretching behind the meteorite. The flight ended with an explosion at an altitude of 7-10 kilometers above the uninhabited area of the Siberian taiga. The power of the explosion estimated at 40-50 megatons, which corresponds to the energy of the most powerful hydrogen bomb, Tsar bomb. The blast wave was recorded by observatories around the world, including in the Western Hemisphere. As a result of the explosion, trees were felled on the territory of more than 2,000 square kilometers. Window glass in the houses, which were at several hundred kilometers from the epicenter of the explosion, was knocked out. Soon after the explosion, a magnetic storm began, which was lasting 5 hours. For several days in the territory from the Atlantic to central Siberia, there was intense glow on the sky and glowing clouds. It was noted that even 3 days before the event, starting from June 27, 1908, unusual atmospheric phenomena began to be observed in Europe, the European part of Russia and western Siberia. Noctilucent clouds, bright twilight, and solar halos. However, no one showed any interest in the fall of the extraterrestrial body at that time. The first expedition to the crash site was sent almost 20 years after the incident in 1927. It was headed by Leonid Alexeyevich Kulik, a Soviet specialist in mineralogy and meteorite research. In total, he organized several scientific expeditions to the explosion zone. This expedition made significant discoveries, whose it was found that in the place of the supposed fall of the meteorite, the force fell over a considerable area, and the force remained standing in the place that should have been the epicenter of the explosion, and there were no traces of the meteorite crater. During the expeditions, Kulik tried to find the remains of the meteorite. In 1938, on an area of 250 square kilometers, organized an aerial survey of the fall site, collected information on the fall of the meteorite from the witnesses of the incident, and made a lot of photographs and filming. It is interesting to note that until now, none of the hypotheses that explain the features of the Tunguska event have not generally accepted. The proposed explanations are very numerous and varied. There are hypotheses that it was really a meteorite, but about what exactly meteorite it was is also a lot of theories, including what the meteorite consisted of ice and evaporated near the surface. Other scientists put forward a version of cosmic dust, which also scattered at the surface of the Earth. Other theories suggest that in fact it fell an alien ship. However, as in the case of the meteorite, not even a teeny fragment of the fallen body was found. Many questions are also caused by the absence of a funnel from the explosion, even if we consider what it was in the air, because calculations showed what the fall of the Tunguska meteorite would lead to the formation of a funnel with a depth of 200 meters and a radius of 1000 meters. Such a hole would be easy to find now. In addition, in the epicenter of the explosion, there should have been more large-scale destruction, but the trees were not collapsed. One of the alternative versions of the Tunguska event is the experiments of the famous physicist Nikola Tesla. According to this hypothesis, on June 30, 1908, Tesla conducted an experiment on the transfer of energy through the air. This version is supported by the fact that a few months before the event, Tesla announced his intention to lighten the way to the North Pole of the expedition of the famous traveler Robert Peary. Also in favor of the Tesla version is the fact that the physicist asked for the maps of the least populated part of Siberia. Records about this have been preserved in the Journal of the Library of Congress. It is also curious what the inhabitants of Canada and Northern Europe noticed the noctilucent clouds in the sky which pulsed. The same was observed by eyewitnesses of Tesla experiments in his laboratory in Colorado Springs. Tunguska catastrophe still continues to excite scientists. A number of researchers believe that science has encountered some unknown person, a unique phenomenon that was yet to be solved. A key element in studying the nature of the Tunguska meteorite is the question of what its material composition was. However, as I said, until now a substance that could be guaranteed to be identified with the substance of the Tunguska meteorite was not found. The second place. Letters from Eugenie Petrov. Eugenie Petrov was a Soviet writer, journalist, and scenarist. He was a co-author of Ilya Ilf, together with whom he wrote the novels 12 Chairs, The Golden Calf, the book One Story America, a number of screenplays, novels, essays, vaudevilles. The works of Ilf and Petrov were translated into dozens of languages of the world, many times were republished and very repeatedly screened. Evgeny Petrov had one unusual hobby. He collected a collection of envelopes from his own letters, which he sent to fictitious addresses to different countries. So what as a result, they returned to him, but with foreign postmarks, stamps, and a note that the address did not exist. But one day, with one of these letters, which Evgeny Petrov sent to New Zealand in April 1939, an unusual story occurred. According to his unusual scheme, he came up with a city called Hyderville and the street Right Beach, the house 7 and the address Merrill or Gina Weasley. In a letter he wrote in English, Dear Merrill, accept sincere condolences in connection with the death of Uncle Pete. Be strong, old man. Forgive me for not writing for a long time. I hope that Ingrid is fine. Kiss the daughter from me. She must be grown up. Your Evgeny. He waited for the letter to return, as well as all previous ones, with a lot of stamps and a seal. The address was not found. But more than 2 months have passed since the letter was sent, and the letter with the corresponding note was not returned. The writer decided that it was a lost and began to forget about it. But August came, and the letter came too, to the writer's great surprise, which was a reply letter. At first, Petrov decided that someone had played a trick on him in the same spirit, but when he read the return address, it was no longer a joke. On the envelope it was written, New Zealand, Hyderville, Right Beach 7, Merrill or Gina Weasley. And all this was confirmed by a stamp New Zealand, Mile Hyderville. The text of the letter was as the following. Dear Evgeny, thank you for your condolences. The ridiculous death of Uncle Pete knocked us out of the road for 6 months. I hope you will forgive for the delay of the letter. Ingrid and I often remember those 2 days what you were there with us. Gloria is a very grown up, and in the autumn will go to the second class. She still keeps the beer you brought to her from Russia. Petrov never went to New Zealand, and so he was all the more amazed to see in the photo of a sturdy physique the man who embraced him, Petrov. On the back of the picture it was written October 9, 1938. When the reader became quite uncomfortable, it was on that day that he got to the hospital in an unconscious state with a severe pneumonia, when within a few days the doctors fought for his life. To understand these misunderstandings or mysticism, Evgeny Petrov wrote another letter to New Zealand, but the answer was no longer waiting. The Great Patriotic War began. From the first days of the war, Eugenie Petrov became a military correspondent. In 1942, Eugenie Petrov flew by plane from Sevastopol to Moscow, and in the Rostov region the plane crashed. From all of the passengers, only he died. On the same day, a letter from New Zealand came to the writer's home. In this letter, Merrill Weasley admired the Soviet soldiers and worried about the life of Petrov. Among other things, the letter contained such lines: "Remember, Evgeny, I was scared when you started swimming in the lake. The water was very cold, but you said what you are destined to crash on an airplane and not drown. Please be careful. Fly as little as possible." What was that? Someone believes in the mystical version. Someone generally calls the whole story as a fiction or simply highly embellished. There is also a version of the fact that this way Yevgeny Kataev was joked with the special services of the USSR, who were tired of checking dozens of the letters sent to them in different countries. But where did the photograph come from?
Be that as it may.
This story formed the basis of the short film Envelope, with Kevin Spacey in the title role. At the beginning of the film, it is stated, based on real events, although the action was somehow postponed in 1985. The first place, the death of the Dyatlov group. This truly horror story happened in January-February 1959 in the Northern Urals, close to the pass, which was later called the Dyatlov Pass, when, in unclear and very strange circumstances, a group of 9 tourists led by Igor Dyatlov died. I will make a reservation right away, but we will not show some photos from this story, so as not to shock the audience. Who's interested in this topic will easily find them on the internet. January 23, 1959, a group of 10 people went on a ski trip. They had to overcome at least 300 kilometers on skis and make an ascent to 2 peaks on the northern Urals. Most of them there are students and recent graduates of the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Despite the young age, they all had a solid tourist experience. On the way, on January 28, one of the participants of the camping trip, Yuri Yudin, because of pain in his leg, stopped his journey and returned home. About the further events is known only from the detected diary entries and photos of the students. On February 12, the group had to reach the final point of the road, the village of Uvizhai, and send a telegram to the Institute Sports Club, and on February 15 returned to Sverdlovsk. That did not happen. Since February 19, search and rescue operations have started. The search involved a large force, which included professional tourists with rock climbing training, military, militia forces with search dogs, members of an Arab exploration party, local residents, and hunters. On February 25, or according to another version, on February 26, a tent of the Dyatlov group was discovered. The next day, about 1.5 kilometers to the northeast of the tent, under the large cedar near the edge of the forest, found the remains of the fire, and next to him the bodies of Georgy Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko, slightly powdered with snow. Rescuers were struck by the fact that both bodies were stripped to their underwear. On the cedar, at an altitude of 4-5 meters, branches were broken off, some of them lay around the bodies. Almost simultaneously, 300 meters from the cedar up the slope in the direction of the tent, Igor Dyatlov's body was found by Mansi hunters. He was without shoes. In the evening of the same day, approximately 330 meters higher up the slope from Dyatlov, a body of Zinaida Kolmogorova was found under a layer of 10 cm thick snow with the help of a search dog. She was warmly dressed, but also without shoes. His face shows signs of nosebleed. A few days later, March 5, 180 meters from the location of the body of Dyatlov and 150 meters from the location of Kolmogorov's body, Rustem Slobodin's corpse was found with iron probes under a snow layer of 15-20 centimeters. He was quite warmly dressed. On his feet there were 4 pairs of socks, on his right foot there was a felt boot of them. A second felt boot and in general almost all of the participants' shoes were found in a tent. On the face of Slobodin there was an ice build-up and signs of bleeding from the nose. Bodies of the rest were found only in May. First found Ludmila Dubinina. Almost immediately after that was found the body of 3 men of Nikolai Thibaut-Brignol, Alexander Kolivatov and Semyon Zolotaryov. At the same time, all the bodies found had the terrible traumas which were obtained in life: fractures of the ribs, cranocerebral trauma, burns, injuries of the limbs. Dubinina's body, moreover, have chest injuries, there were no eyes, tongue, and a part of the upper lip. Analysis shows that there are no signs of drinking in the bodies, and on the clothes of some people from the Dyatlov group there was a radioactive trace, while witnesses claim that the skin of the bodies had an unusual orange color. The investigation succeeded in establishing the following. In the middle of the night, all 9 members of the Dyatlov group, for unexplained reasons, did not take advantage of the exit, cut the tent inside with knives, and went into the forest without outer clothing and shoes, leaving at the same time in the tent all supplies, clothing, heating, skiing, and food. And what is no less strange, in the footsteps left by them in the snow, we can say that all went quietly. Further, apparently, under the cedar their 2 bodies they found. They tried to kindle a fire. A lot of firewood was prepared, but to do it in the severe frost with bare hands, being barefoot impossible. Especially it is impossible to break off branches of adult cedar at an altitude of 4-5 meters, and all this at night without a single flashlight. The question is also cited by the fact that not all the people have already left the divorced fire with the stock of firewood. On the contrary, they dispersed in small groups of 3-4 people in different directions. They were perished. Despite all these facts, the investigation was hastily completed, and the cause of death was spontaneous force, which tourists were unable to overcome. Needless to say, even when the relatives of the deceased, never of the society, nor even the specialists involved in this investigation don't believe in it, this story has received a wide response, and still a lot of people and journalists are conducting their own investigations. To date, there are more than a dozen different versions and theories of what happened to the group of Dyatlov. A number of researchers are proposing a natural theory of the death of a group, for example, an avalanche, but this theory does not stand up to any criticism, if only because the tent was left standing, the ski poles that fastened it were not crumbled, and the search group did not find any traces of the avalanche. Other researchers believe that the group of Dyatlov could be killed by escaped prisoners from local camps or hunters of the local people of Mansi for desecrating their sacred places. However, there were no shoots at that time, and there were no sacred places for Mansi, and when this was so, why did the group of Dyatlov, after leaving the tent, not try to hide from the pursuers, if they were, but rather began to build a fire? There are also paranormal versions that Dyatlov's group was ruined by the UFOs, and eyewitnesses claim that they saw bright lights in those areas in those days, or that people have ruined in Yeti. There are many supporters of the so-called missile theory, which implies that in the death of the Dyatlov group, the test of a rocket that flew over the place their tourists installed a tent poisoned them with toxic fumes to blame. This explains, for example, the strange color of skin and the radiation trace on clothing. However, there are a lot of versions, but none of these versions can fully explain all the circumstances of the death of the Dyatlov group. Some versions explain the cause of injuries well, some examine in detail certain facts and episodes, but in the whole picture there is no one. The weird mystery of the death of the Dyatlov group has not yet been uncovered, and this attracts more and more attention to itself. Now you know the 5 most mysterious and mystical stories of the USSR and Russia.
That's all, comrades. Subscribe to the channel Red Russians and click the like button. A lot of interesting things ahead.